السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll go through إن شاء الله تعالى verses in Surah Al-Hadid, verses number 15 to 17 إن شاء الله. Verses number 15 to 17 from Surah Al-Hadid. So open your Mus'haf إن شاء الله and follow and try to repeat after me and to correct the recitation, and then we'll go through the verses briefly إن شاء الله. Verse number 15 in Surah Al-Hadid, Surah number 57. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فاليوم لا يؤخذ منكم فدية ولا من الذين كفروا مأواكم النار هي مولاكم وبئس المصير. The next آية. ألم يأن للذين آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق ولا يكونوا كالذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبل فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. The last آية. اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. The verses. فاليوم لا يؤخذ منكم، إخفاء، منكم نون after الكاف، فدية تنوين after الواو، إدغام with غنة with tone، فدية and then the dal also is having قلقلة، فدية ولا من الذين كفروا مأواكم النار. The noon with shadda takes two counts. If you continue, مأواكم النار هي مولاكم وبئس المصير. ألم يأن للذين آمنوا تمد أن تخشع، إخفاء نون after التاء، أن تخ and the خاء is heavy، أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق ولا يكونوا كالذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبل، فاء and then باء with قلقلة، فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. تنوين after تنوين إدغام. The last آية. اعلموا then you have the mad أن الله نون with shadda takes two counts يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا بنون الشدة قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. The translation to these three verses. So today no ransom will be taken from you or from those who disbelieved. Your refuge is the fire. It is most worthy of you, and wretched is the destination. Has the time not come for those who have believed that their hearts should become humbly submissive at the remembrance of Allah and what has come down of the truth? And let them not be like those who were given the scripture before, and a long period passed over them, So their hearts hardened, and many of them are defiantly disobedient. Know that Allah gives life to the earth after its lifelessness. We have made clear to you the signs, perhaps you will understand. Verse number 15 is a continuation of the previous verses that talked about the hypocrites and what's going to happen to them in the day of judgment. It should have been mentioned with the previous verses, but we didn't go through the tafsir of it. And it's a good reminder to bring these verses back again before we get forward in verse number 16 and 17. So the verse number 15, فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْكُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. On that day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to the hypocrites, those who were separated from the believers. They were together with the believers from the very beginning, as they were with them in this life. They went from one stage to the other in the day of judgment with the believers, till the hypocrites, they thought that they get away with their evil actions. And as they deceived the believers in the day of judgment, this worked. And this is the deception that it's going to happen to them in the day of judgment, till the lights are distributed right before the salat and after the total darknesses, and the hypocrites, they get nothing. So it will be said to them to go back and seek some light. And once the separation happens, then the fence, this wall, will be established between the two groups. And one side of it has the mercy, which is facing the believers, and the other side is the punishment. And the hypocrites will call the believers from the other side of the fence, and they would say, "Alam nakum ma'akum, weren't we with you?" They would say, "Yes, but you fatantum anfusakum, you put yourself on trial, you committed this evil action of hypocrisy, and you waited for the harm for the believers, and you had doubts, and the false hopes deceived you, till the command of Allah came, death, where you were in that state, and the shaitan deceived you." Then this ayah, فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْكُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. On that day, no ransom, fidya, will be taken from you, neither from the disbelievers. Nothing will be taken from them. مَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارِ, your abode, your final destination is the hellfire. هِيَ مَوْلَاكُمْ, this is your refuge. This is the place that you would not leave whatsoever. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرِ, and wretched is this destination and this final destination that you are upon. And this is, again, as we said, with those who died in the state of major hypocrisy, those who had disbelief in their hearts and they imitated the believers, or they deceived the believers. So if you would, as basically the verse is saying, if you take everything, if you own everything on the face of earth, to give it as a ransom, it's not going to be accepted from you. Your place is the hellfire. Ma'wakum, al-ma'wa is the refuge, is the place that a person doesn't leave whatsoever. Hiya mawlakum, this is what would be your support, your help, your place of dwelling forever. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرِ, and such a severe punishment for them, and harsh words as a result of their evil actions. All of that is because of the hypocrisy that they did in this life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this ransom in more than one place in the Quran, because those who disbelieved, لو أن لهم ما في الأرض جميعا لو أن لهم ما في الأرض جميعا لافتدوا به. If they have all of what's in the earth of wealth that they used to fight over and kill themselves and kill others for, if they have this entire world and whatever it contains, they would ransom themselves in the day of judgment with it, because it's of no value in the day of judgment. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to have in our hearts. The value of this life in our hearts is the value of this life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the people in the day of judgment. Because everybody's going to the day of judgment. So in the day of judgment, how would you look back to this world, and what value that you would give to this world? It's only the good deeds and the things that help the person to do the good deeds. Other than that, it's going to be regret. So from now, a person should put this dunya, this worldly life, in its right perspective. That this is not the thing that would make us happy and miserable and concerned and everything like this. Yes, it happens, of course, but it's all about the hereafter, and what's valued in the hereafter. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْكُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. And the disbelievers also, no fidya will be taken from them. No ransom will be taken from the disbelievers. وَمَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارُ. And see the words, how it's used, as we see with the wording of the ayat. مَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارُ. Al-ma'wa is usually a word that is used for the comfort, the place that you will stay and live in for the rest of your life. When you say that to someone when they're young, and this is your place that you will have comfort in, and you chose that for you to stay. But this is how it's mentioned with the hellfire, because this is what they will be in forever. هي مولاكم. المولى, the way that the disbelievers were their mawla in this life. The hypocrites, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said one of their characteristics is that they always take the muwala, they always seek help and support from the disbelievers, from the enemies of Allah. So the enemies of Allah are the hellfire in this world, because they will be among the people of the hellfire in the hereafter. So therefore, as a just punishment for the hypocrites, that the hellfire will be their mawla, will be their protection or their support, and so. And of course, this is nothing but burning them forever. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. And what a worse abode or destination there is for them. فَالْيَوْمَ لَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْكُمْ فِدْيَةٌ وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارُ هِيَ مَوْلَاكُمْ وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. Then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after this mentioned and bringing all of these verses from the very beginning of the surah till verse 15 in your heart, when you're reading the surah like this, with all of these beautiful meanings in it and the admonition that is present in these verses, then the ayah, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. It's a question that has, as we talked about that before, this itab, this blame that you would get from a loved one. When someone is so much loving towards you, and you say, why didn't you do this matter like this? It has so much love in it. And at the same time, it's saying to the person, you ought to have done something better because you are such and such. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after mentioning the affairs of the believers, believing men and women, and the hypocrites, men and women in the hereafter, this is something that should do what to the heart? It should bring khushu' and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and humbleness, and to be in that state of in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being al-azim subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have this itab to the believers, that they're not yet in that state of khushu' and devotion in the hearts yet. What's the matter with them with these verses? أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. It didn't come yet the time for them to soften their hearts and to devote themselves to the dhikr, to the remembrance of Allah, which is this Quran. أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ is the Quran. And for them to submit themselves to the commands of Allah in the Quran, and what the Quran forbade them of doing, and to devote their hearts to it, and what وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ, and what came down from al-haqq, which is what the Prophet ﷺ came with. And this is two things, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this ayah is the encouragement to al-ijtihad, the encouragement to struggle and to strive to devote the hearts to Allah. The devotion of the heart is not something that comes by default like this. It's not something that is thrown into the heart without one's actions. No, a person has to strive, and has to take the means to have the devotion and the consciousness of the heart to be devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down, the Quran and the deen of Allah. And these verses of the Quran that when we recite it, when we hear it, it should penetrate our hearts. What's in the day of judgment, the believers, the hypocrites, as if a person is there. The people in the day of judgment, when they see this, they are in full khushu', in full khudu', in full subjecting them, in full devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's too late. What needs to be done is with the certainty in the heart that the person is upon this in this life. And for the believers to remember these uh, great admonitions from Allah. Who's the one that is reminding us of what's going to be in the day of judgment? You know, when you listen to a reminder from a human being, it touches your heart. You find your heart soft. And the Quran is the reminders from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke the Quran. The Quran is the speech of Allah. So it's the best maw'idah, the best admonition, and the best reminder for the hearts of the believers. So they would go back to themselves and work on themselves and put themselves accountable for their actions. So alam ya'ni, such a beautiful thing that makes the hearts of the believers, melt with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling the believers and saying what's the matter with them, what makes them lazy, and what's make you not going in haste and submitting yourself to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't it time for you to devote your heart to the remembrance of Allah and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down of the haqq? And when a person hears these ayat and he doesn't find this in his heart, then he should strive to bring the life of his heart again. And then warning them, وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلُ فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. And do not be like the people of the book before you. طَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ, which means the time had prolonged for them. Long period passed over them. فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, so their hearts hardened. So one of the reasons why the hearts become hard and is not affected by the words of Allah, the Quran, is not affected by what is being mentioned in the verses about the hereafter, it's because of the long time. The time has been prolonged for them. Long period of time passed over. They used to be humble, they used to be devoted, but then days and hours and years passed in forgetfulness and not giving the proper nutrition to the hearts. What happened? The heart becomes hardened instead of being soft by the ayat of Allah. Like exactly the land, when you don't take care of it with watering it and protecting it from the harmful weeds and things like this, after some time it dies and it becomes barren land. The same thing with the heart, and that's why the next verse is an amazing one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, that physical example. So the heart's needs at all times to be irrigated with the dhikr of Allah, with the deen of Allah, with the Quran, to remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down, and to mention the wisdom and to be upon the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed in the Quran. As Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he said that this is how the hearts are in need of this at all times, and not to be like the people of the book. The people of the book, what happened to them? They received revelation from Allah, but they were not steadfast upon it. They were not firm upon it. The time passed on them while they are in that forgetfulness, so their iman become ruined and their certainty is taken away. فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Their hearts become so hard they would reject the truth and they would not believe in it. وَكَثِيرٌ مِّنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. And many of them are fasiqun, defiantly disobedient, even to what they believe is revelation from Allah. So it's such a powerful verse that we should not blame anyone but our own selves, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, is showing us the way. The more time the person lives, the more the person's heart will be hardened if a person is not taking care of his heart with the deen of Allah, with the Quran, with the ibadah of Allah, with being away from the forgetfulness. And that's why the next verse, اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. That know that Allah gives life to the earth after its lifelessness. So the heart, if a person, when we're listening to this verse, and the pain that you feel in your heart, that how can I bring back my heart the way it was or the way it ought to be in state of remembrance of Allah and to be obedient to Allah, devoted to Allah, then this verse comes to show us the cure and the way. That have the certain knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يحيي الأرض بعد موتها. He gives life to this earth after it's dead. So the same thing, He gives life to the hearts after it's dead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one. So seek help from Allah. If a person is truthfully, sincerely turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with devotion, with dua, that Allah revive our hearts, that Allah purify our hearts, that Allah give us the devotion and give us in our hearts the love of Allah and the fear of Allah and the hope for the rewards of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tranquility in our hearts with the deen of Allah and the steadfastness upon the deen. This is the most beautiful and the most important dua that a person can ask in this life, is with matters of deen, with matters of purification of one's heart. As the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives life to the earth after it's dead, the same thing with matters of the heart. And the human beings, they might put water in the land and so on, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives it life. So, and also the ayah, the first, of course, the apparent meaning of the ayah is that these ayat, these verses of the Quran, it guides the minds and the intellect of the people and their hearts to seek the knowledge of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. And that the one that, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave life to the earth after its death, He is able to give life to the dead after they die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the sign clearly that we see it with our own eyes. The one that gives life to the earth after it looks dead is the one that would give life to those who are buried under the earth, after they die. You see how there's nothing that you see on the earth, or the seeds underneath the earth is just something that has no life to it whatsoever. The water comes down, and by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes green and beautiful, and it's life after death. The same way, the people will be resurrected on the Day of Judgment. Even it's mentioned in the Hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His will, a specific, or some water or some rain would rain from the skies, and people will be resurrected. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would then judge between them. And also, so this is with regards to the resurrection and the Day of Resurrection. The one that gave life to this earth after its death is the one with the rainwater. He's the one that is able to give life to the dead hearts, with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down on His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from Al-Haqq, which is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As Imam Sadi rahimahullah, he said, هذه الآية أنه لا عقل لمن لم يهتدي بآيات الله ولم ينقد بشرائع الله. This ayah is an evidence that there is no aql. It is an evidence that there is no reason, there is no intellect for the one that is not guided by the ayat and the signs of Allah, and the one that does not submit himself to the shara'a of Allah, to the rules and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no aql. Can you hear me? Is the voice better? طيب. I guess it stays for a bit. Inshallah, hopefully be okay, inshallah. So the last thing that we mentioned is that this verse is an evidence that the person, when he's not guided by the ayat of Allah and the deen of Allah, is a sign that he has no aql, he has no reason whatsoever. As Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he said. When we look at these verses, and when we look at the words of it, it's verses that we need to visit it many times, inshallah. First, when it says فَالْيَوْمَ, so that today, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the Day of Judgment al-yawm, as if it's today, something very near to happen. لَا يُؤْخَذ, it's not going to be accepted, it's not going to be taken from أَخَذَ, minkum, from you, referring to the hypocrites, fidyatun, any ransom, from dal, ya. This is the fidya, this is the ransom. No ransom from them. وَلَا مِنَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, neither wala from the disbelievers. وَمَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارِ, that means al-ma'wa is from alif waw ya, the abode or the place of everlasting place. مأواكم النار, the fire, هي مولاكم. The fire is your mawla, your protector, and of course the fire is not a protector, it's a place of destruction. But this is to bring this humility and humiliation into their hearts because of what they used to do, as we heard. وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ, and what wretched is al-masir, or the destination of theirs. And then the ayat alam ya'ni. Ya'ni comes from time. Come the time, from alif nun ya. Alif nun ya means, isn't it time for? And it comes from alif nun ya, and it refers to the time. And you see that, for example, ana al-layli wa atraf an-nahar, the times of the night. And also فَأَنَّ لَهُمْ, that it's never going to happen to them. So أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, to those who believed, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ. تَخْشَعَ from خَشَعَ, become humble, become devoted, like the earth when it's humbled. قُلُوبُهُمْ, their hearts, لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ, to the remembrance of Allah, to the Quran, to the deen of Allah. وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ, and what came down from al-haqq, from the truth. وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ. أُوتُوا, they were given from alif ta ya, al-kitab, the book, which is the people of the book. Min, from before, min qabl, from before them. فَطَالَ, prolonged, from ta waw lam. فَطَالَ عليهم, upon them, الأمد, the term, from alif mim dal. فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم, so their hearts became hardened, from قاف سين واو. فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم, and many of them are فاسقون. And then the ayat اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون. For you to have aql and reason. Again, the benefits of these verses, really, I'm not sure if you heard when Sa'di rahimahullah, he mentioned that this is such an important topic to bring the certainty in the hearts of what's going to be in the Day of Judgment. And as Anas radiallahu anhu, he said about this ayah that it took only 4 years for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give this itab, or this blame, to the believers with regards to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying that to the companions of the Allah, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to be the best of all generations. So you can imagine then what would be the case of those who came later, in our situations and so on, when we turn away from the deen of Allah and things of this life distract us from the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the person then is kind of imitating the ways of the people before, the people of Bani Israel, how they invented their own religion, and they made their own halal and their own haram, and how many prophets that they killed as a result of their hardness in their heart. All of that is, human beings are human beings. When the person does not take well care of his heart, the same way that he would take well care of his land, then the heart becomes ruined. And sometimes it becomes not too late, but it becomes difficult for the person, but it's worth it for the person to return. But one of the most important means is to be sincere and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give life to the heart again, the way that He gives life to the earth and the way that He gives life to the dead. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and to perfect our iman, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. We'll continue, inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow, hopefully with a better connection, inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.